So I thought I'd take a few minutes just to give some key takeaways at the end of the talk there with Denise. I found it extremely interesting, as I said in the conversation, but there are some things there that which I've covered in the book and which I feel we can draw out a little bit more. But I'll just summarize them. So look, there's the two roles of HR. One, they're the stewards of the culture. They're the ones who want to make sure that the right sort of people are coming into the organization that promote agility, within the organization. But equally, not only are HR looking after the culture of the organization, HR themselves are the subject of change as well, as we talked about in the podcast. Consultants and coaches can cause issues, and you've got to really deal with these individuals quickly. Because quite often incumbent coaches and consultants think they already know everything that needs to be done, and it quite often isn't the case. And if you allow these individuals to get root into the organisation, quite often they can sabotage the efforts of your transformation. Nomenclature can be tricky, but look, this is a tricky subject in itself, because as I said in the podcast, sometimes we can take the time to understand what we're meaning by certain things before we eliminate them. And I know there's some of my contemporaries out there who would sooner not use the word agile because it means too many things to too many people, and equally the same with the word transformation. But I think there's opportunity that we can explore in understanding what we mean by and what we don't mean by certain things. So as Denise says, look, we've got to make sure we don't use too much nomenclature and be very clear on what it is we mean by it. Be clear on the role of the agile coach and mentor. Look, that there is the aspect that a coach can be used for remedial or developmental purposes, and quite often they're both, as Denise said. Internal coaches are a better use of time and a better use of resource rather than hiring expensive coaches to come in to the organisation, because quite often what I've found in organisations is that people can become reliant and dependent on coaches. And if that's going to be the case, as it sometimes is in the early stages, you'd want to make sure that those coaches are internal to the organisation. So I think a better investment of time and resource in an organisation is to train up coaches rather than hire them in externally and then keep them on indefinitely. I know coaches in certain organisations who've been there for 2 or 3 years, and quite often by a year of being in an organisation, one would have to question the value of a coach when they've been in the organisation for that long. Coaches also, if they're going to be internal, they're also going to have day jobs. So be very clear on what hat they're wearing, because that becomes a very important aspect for the change as well. Establish guiding principles for the transformation. Educate people. It's one of the fundamental aspects that I discuss in the book, is that we need to make sure that people, especially people at the top, the executive, are really clear and understanding why we're changing and how we're going to go changing. But equally, in addition to that, I'm very much in favour of getting people to co-diagnose what the issues are within the organisation, and also co-creating and co-designing the solutions. I think they're extremely important. Also, as we start to change, be very clear with people on how they're going to be reviewed and assessed. I think it's only fair to expect people to be somewhat, reluctant to change if they're not going to be told how they're going to be assessed, especially if their pay and rations is going to be part and parcel of what we explore here. They just really do need to have clarity on that. So if we're going to be assessed on certain things, we need to make sure that we do be clear on that. Executive leaders are key in leading the transformation, but don't wait for them. Look, they'll make a huge difference, and this is why it's one of the fundamental principles of my book, is to make sure that leaders really do understand how important they are to that transformation. But equally, make sure we don't hang around or wait for them, because quite often the transformation needs to be getting on a pace. And expect pushback. I mean, look, I'm not a great fan of the term resistance to change, because quite often that in itself evokes resistance, because it sort of makes people think about the them and us. And so, look, expect pushback, reluctance for change, and especially expect that within HR. Not within HR as a whole. I think we should be looking for people, individuals like Denise, who who in my perspective is an awesome agile leader, from her humility about seeing herself as the person who is the core aspect of the change. Not everyone will appreciate or even see the benefits of agile, but that's the job in the early days, is helping people understand what we mean by agile, why we're doing it, and why other organizations are doing it. But look, one thing to point out though, I've mentioned agile many times here, and in this context, I'd like you to think of agile not as a process which is done within IT, but organizational agility, agile across the organization, rather than in some small aspect and in one small context, i.e. the process. No, this is agile across the organization. In other words, organizational agility. Just to move on here now and talk about 3 top learnings that Denise gave us. I think these are extremely important, and one in particular. Experimentation is the key to changing practices. HR don't always have the answers. Look, we might expect that they do, but they quite often won't. Because agile is quite often, and I'm not talking about agile process, I'm talking about organizational agility here, is extremely important, but it's also very new to people. So don't expect that they're always going to have the answers. This next point that Denise brought up is absolutely fundamental. Bring human dignity back to the workplace. I mean, how better a way to say that? Yeah. Find the courage to have the difficult conversations with people, because quite often people need to know that there is some aspects of change here that needs to be addressed. And quite often in addressing those, we're actually going to find that we're going to lose some good people. So don't be afraid to lose those good people, because quite often if the culture isn't matching, then we have to understand that there's maybe time to let people move on. And then quickly but compassionately deal with the noise around the transformation. Again, there's always going to be noise. There's always going to be people who are going to be reluctant to change because maybe they don't understand why we're changing. But you have to deal with this quickly, either in the form of education, and if education doesn't seem to be landing, then we really need to start to escalate and understand that if organizational agility is a key aspect of our strategy for improving the organization, then we need to deal with the reluctance quickly. And finally, transformation needs to happen on an individual level. Don't expect the business or the company to change. And I love the way Denise put that in the talk. It's like, who is the company? Companies are quite an abstraction. We talk about organizations needing to change, but they're just abstractions. They don't really exist. The things that really exist are the people. It's the people in the organizations who change. It's also equal the people who don't change. So businesses and companies and organizations will change when people change. And I think this is the core and utter fundamental aspect of change in organizations. And transformations will fall flat on their faces every time if people will stick their heels in and choose not to change. And so much time and money and effort will be wasted if that's the case. So thanks for listening to this review of the podcast with Denise DiPiano. I hope this review has been useful for you, and I look forward to sharing more podcasts and reviews of podcasts in the future. I hope you have a fantastic day and good luck with your Agile transformation. This has been Mark Buchan, the Agile Leader. Goodbye.